Now, freedom is the opposite of fear. To free ourselves from fear requires tremendous honesty, courage, and love. And if we want to be freed from fear, the first thing I think we need to recognize is that, yes, the world can be a dangerous place. Even for those of us who are well insured and well protected and well prepared, it can be a dangerous place. The philosopher Alfred North Whitehead once said, "It is the business of the future to be dangerous." We live, especially in these days, in a time of rapid and unpredictable change. It was quite interesting at the 1893 World's Fair and Exposition in Chicago. A group of distinguished scholars were invited to gaze 100 years into the future. Here's what they thought they would find. Prisons and poorhouses will almost disappear, and so will divorce. Taxation will be reduced to a minimum. There will be no need for standing armies, and the government will have grown simpler and smaller. Well, it didn't quite turn out that way, did it? And although we've made some wonderful advances, those prognosticators saw only the possibilities, the roses and the sunshine, and not the inherent dangers and pitfalls that we experience. Regardless of how well prepared, we can't escape the inevitable losses and accidents and intrusions of life. And so I have a suggestion. You may think I'm crazy. I think to get a leg up on fear, sometimes it's helpful to imagine the worst. Now, I know about possibility thinking, positive thinking, and I know what the mind can do in terms of germinating our fear. But sometimes when we imagine the worst scenario, the worst possibility, it's like facing our fears head on. You know, early in my ministry, one of my parishioners came to me with a book that he said had shaped and transformed his life. And the title of the book was something like this. Never seen the book again, I just remember the title. What I would do if I knew I could not fail. And for many years, I kind of looked at my life like that. What would I do if I knew I couldn't fail? And that's not a bad way to look at life sometimes. But I also like to think about what I would do if I knew I could fail. If I knew I could go broke. If I knew that I might die, what would I do? And then I launch out, maybe in spite of the inevitable or possible consequences. It probably won't happen, but it might happen. So I launch out anyway, facing my fears head on, and then my fears kind of evaporate. I remember a story by the Buddhist nun Pema Chodron. She told of one of her teachers who was taking a journey. He was traveling with his attendants to a monastery that he'd never seen before. As they neared the gates, he saw a large guard dog with huge teeth, huge jowls and teeth, and deep red eyes. It was growling ferociously, struggling to break free of the chain. The dog was desperate to attack them, and it yanked on the chain repeatedly. They grew closer and closer. Now the teacher could see the bluish tongue of the dog, the spittle spraying from his jowls. They walked past the dog. They kept their distance and entered the gate of the monastery. And then suddenly, the chain broke. The dog rushed at the group. The attendants screamed and froze in terror. And this teacher instinctively turned toward the dog, ran at the dog as fast as he could, yelling and screaming. The dog turned around, started yelping, and ran away. And for me, sometimes imagining the worst possibilities is a way of facing off our fears, going headlong into them, and quite often we see them just turn tail and run. They evaporate. And we launch out then, we forge ahead. It is the future, the nature of the future to be dangerous, but we can still face that future with courage and with love. Mahatma Gandhi once said, "Where there is fear, we lose the way of our spirits." You see, fear shuts us down. It puts us behind walls. It creates a sense of false bravado and a kind of pseudo-independence. It stops our creativity. It makes our minds and thinking rigid. It isolates and traps us. But we can choose another way. We can choose another way, regardless of what faces us. You know, sometimes our worst fears are realized. Ask anyone who's lived into old age. A lot of things can happen when you get old, and a lot of them are bad. Now, we have a number of folks in this congregation who have gone to nursing homes. And that may be a frightening prospect for some of you. You know, the big fear, the big one is death. That's the dread. And I think until we've come to terms with death, we'll never really be able to fully live. But if you ask people what they're afraid of, most of the time they won't say death. They'll say, "I'm afraid of getting old and crippled and helpless and ending up in a place like that." But I've seen some people in places like that have retained their dignity, their humanity, their spirituality. They've come to know themselves and God in a deeper way. They've had to come to terms with helplessness and loneliness and the finitude of life and the loss of control. And it's been a very beautiful thing. Not an easy thing, but a very courageous thing and a very beautiful thing to see. They faced that fear with courage and with love. And in some cases, they've even faced death in a remarkable way.